Good morning. So for context, next door at First Pres, we are journeying through Advent with a sermon series on living the questions, without providing any definitive answers as a means of deepening our Advent journey. The text from Romans today is a caution to not fall into hopelessness. And so today, we will begin with the question, for what do we hope? A couple of weeks ago, I was having coffee with a friend, and as we were catching up on each other's lives, our conversation inevitably turned to our distress over the flurry of news headlines that have us concerned. Maybe you've had one of those conversations lately. After the niceties are shared, the next point of connection seems to often be the hardships that so many are facing. How everywhere we look, things are becoming too expensive. Disturbing images of ICE raids where parents are being pulled away from children, by masked men, no doubt. People being shot in the street, people being shot in schools, wars ravaging overseas, wars of political extremism here at home, name-calling, mean-spiritedness, blame. You get the picture. As we continue to connect over our broken hearts for the harm being caused in the world today, she said something that I will never forget. She said, "I just wish that God would come and save us already." The moment she said it, I felt as though I had been struck by lightning. And even before I thought about what was coming out of my mouth, the words just flew, and I said, God has already saved us. It was a surreal experience, like something deep inside of me, something outside of my normal cognitive process had kicked in. After seemingly skipping over my brain, it was like my soul spoke some words in our conversation. God has already saved us. She looked at me surprised, and I looked back at her surprised. And then she narrowed her eyes and she started nodding. We sat in silence for about a minute, and I was worried that she would ask me more about what I had said, assuming that I was being flippant about the suffering in the world by making some bold proclamation to end our conversation about sad things. We continued on about various topics for a little while longer, and then we said our goodbyes. I've thought about what I said many times since that meeting in that coffee shop. God has already saved us. I mean, I'm not wrong. This is a true statement of our Christian faith. Every Easter morning, I do find myself loudly singing, "Love's redeeming work is done, alleluia. Fought the fight, the battle won, alleluia." This is the story of our faith, right? The biggest battle has already been fought, and God emerged victorious. By overcoming death, Christ has already proven that the worst thing that can happen to us can't and won't happen anymore. The notion that God has already saved us is a central tenet to our Christian faith. So why did it seem so odd to me to utter the sentence, God has already saved us? Why was it so weird that that would emerge from the depths of my being in the midst of a conversation about horrible things happening in our world today? What felt strange in that moment, and what feels strange right now, is the fact that our faith does in fact hold two important claims together at the same time. God has already saved us through conquering sin and death, and this great victory did not leave our world a perfect and sinless place. The victory is won, and sin is still here. Death has lost its sin, and evil still kills the innocent, and it's horrible. One of the hardest things to do as people of faith is to claim the truth in the words, God has already saved us, while looking around at our world and seeing the number of people crying out, help me, save me. God has already saved us. Some time ago, I met a pastor that I admire, and he explained it to me as this: the major battle against sin and evil has already been fought and won. The flood of evil has receded. What remains behind are the leftover pools of destructive mess that we have to continue to mop up. An interesting image, isn't it? I want to tell you a story that I think offers a helpful analogy for us as we wrestle with the tension in that illustration. A couple of years ago, my dear friend, Anna Catherine, moved into a new house. One of the best parts of this house was the kitchen, with its gorgeous new fancy appliances. She let me know that one of the greatest appeals of this new house was the kitchen and how she was looking forward to preparing meals in that new space. And then one day, her 14-year-old son decided to make a frozen pizza. The first time he had made a pizza for himself. Now, she cautiously reminded him not to put the pizza in the oven while still sitting on the cardboard that came in the package, to which he responded, duh. Flash forward a handful of minutes, and smoke is billowing through the lower floor of the house while the smoke alarm is blaring. My friend rushes into the kitchen, tears open the oven door to discover that her darling son has placed the pizza in the oven while resting on the plastic cutting board that has now completely melted all over the bottom of her beautiful, fancy, not inexpensive oven. When she asked him about this decision, he explained that he had only ever seen a pizza sitting atop a plastic cutting board. So he assumed that the plastic cutting board was part of the process of making the pizza in the oven. After days of scraping and scraping at the pool of melted plastic in the oven, my friend did, in fact, salvage the appliance. I ask about it periodically. I love hearing that story retold. As you can probably imagine, it's hilarious, especially with the duh at the beginning. She says every once in a while she will notice a tiny speck of plastic, and she tells me I can still smell it sometimes. The cutting board in the oven incident is now the stuff of legend for all who have heard the story, and for me, it's offered another way to think about the story of our faith and the reality of the claim that God has already saved us. Just like the meticulous scraping of the oven, God has already saved us from being a total loss through the life, teachings, death, and resurrection of Jesus. The biggest mess has already been cleaned up. The oven is not a lost cause. The plastic did not destroy the oven, just like evil did not destroy humanity. However, there are still particles of plastic to be found. We know that traces of evil and pockets of sin are still very much present in the world. We can see it. They're so present that, dare we say, we can even smell it sometimes. Our Christian faith is one that acknowledges that in winning the ultimate battle, our broken world was not made perfect. While we may have been left with the teachings and the tools to build the kingdom and the kingdom here on earth, we've got many messy puddles to mop up. In this year's Advent series at First Pres, focused on living the questions, as we light the first candle for Advent today together as two communities made one, the candle for hope, perhaps we can sit with, even wrestle with, the question of what is it that we hope for? If our faith acknowledges that the biggest battle has already been won, what are we hoping for now? Is it for the return of Christ to come quickly and clean up the rest of the mess left behind? Or do we hope for understandings of our role in mopping up the pools of leftover bad things? Do we even want to know if it is our role to take on that hard and dangerous work? Do we hope for the kind of faith that really believes that to be a disciple of Jesus is to believe deep down in our innermost selves that God really has already won the ultimate battle? God has already saved us from sin and evil, from death, from ourselves. That's the belief in our faith from which all else flows. God has already saved us. Say that to yourselves a few times this week. Acknowledge its truth, and then, and only then, after acknowledging that truth, ask yourself, what is it that I hope for this year? What does hope look like as we begin a new church year today, when that hope is anchored in the belief that we are already inheritors of the biggest prize there is? What does hope look like when it is framed not in the despair of the world, which there is an abundance of, but in the power that God has already freed us from ultimate despair? God has already saved us. We get to tell this story again from the very beginning with the birth of Jesus, starting today. So what will you hope for this year? And all of God's children who could said, Amen.